So the first thing that we want to do is we want to decide on where our camera goes. We want to set our camera angle and determine that before we set any lights. So we're just going to do a very simple setup. We're going to do one subject, kind of talking head. This can be used for more complicated subjects, but I think just doing it as a one-person setup really helps you to just get clarity on where the lights are going and what they should look like. So now we got our main camera set up. So this is where me as a subject is going to stand. We got our camera decided. So now we can look at where we want to put our main light, which is called our key. So we have our large main light that is right off about 45, the stand is about 45 degrees from the camera. We want this to be a very large, soft light, and we want to put it close to the subject, basically as close as we can without it being in the camera, because the closer the light is to the subject, the softer it's going to be. And also the larger it is, the softer it's going to be. So this is a very flattering look for lighting somebody.
Striking.
And gives a very soft, soft shadows, all of that.
And for the key light, we're using a great big softbox. And one of the reasons for that is just that the back side of a softbox is black. It contains the light, so we don't have light spilling all over the room. But bed sheets, diffusion, like on those reflectors, they'll often have a soft diffusion panel in them. Those work great. You can bounce the light off a wall or an umbrella. The downside to those is that you just get a little bit more bounce in the room, so it's a little bit less controlled. But we just like a big softbox because it just controls the light a little bit more and gets the light really soft for us.
You can use a window for this. There's times when you're in a situation and you have a really good big window with soft light coming in. You can totally use a window as your main key light. It does not have to be a continuous electric light. After you have your key, you're going to want to look and determine whether or not you want a fill. Now, a fill is going to be determined somewhat by how big your softbox is. If you have a large softbox and you are happy with the softness of the shadows, then you might not need a fill. I personally do not like using fills most of the time when you're working with a single subject, just because it adds two catch lights in the eyes, and I just find the eyes are so big in terms of you don't want like wonky stuff happening with the lights. Having that one light that just adds that sparkle just feels more natural. And so I like to avoid it just because of the two catch lights in the eyes. So personally for me, I would prefer to have a larger softbox that softens my shadows so I don't need a fill. So your fill, the job of your fill is really just to soften the shadows so that they're not too deep. It's not to take away the shadows, because then you're going to have something that looks like garbage. It's going to be very flat. It's just to soften them if you find the shadows are looking a little too deep.
And one note on this, we sometimes use a reflector. You can use a reflector to be your fill. That can often work great. You got a silver side like this. But you can also use a fill in the negative sense. You can actually use a negative fill. And so sometimes you actually might need to use a negative fill, a black side, so that the ambient light is actually darkened. And that would darken your shadows. If you're finding that things are too flat and you've got too much ambient lights bouncing around, you can actually use the black side of a reflector. I don't know if that's going to work or not in here. Yeah, a little bit. To kind of just darken, add a shadow on the side of that.
Another thing that can be used as a fill is your window light or your ambient light. And so if you have a lot of ambient light in your room, there's a good chance you won't need a fill, just because that is going to be acting as a fill. But you want to make sure your ambient light matches whatever other light sources you are using. So if you have a lot of daylight coming into the room and you're going to use daylight balanced lights, then turn off any tungsten or fluorescent lights in the room. You do not want those as ambients, right? So we've set our key light, we've determined we do not want to fill, and so the next thing that we want to do is we want to add a kicker light. You can add this just to add a little bit more dimension and depth. What we like to do for the kicker light is we like to place it at 180 degrees from the key light. And this just helps to just bounce the subject out from the background a little bit on that darker shadow side. But what you want to do when you're placing the kicker is you want to make sure that it is not on the subject's face or taking away the shadow over here. Basically, all the kicker is supposed to do is it's supposed to hit the hair and the back of the subject's arm, just to kind of pop them out, chisel them out of the background a little bit. You want to make sure it's not coming onto the face or the skin as much as possible. A kicker can be extremely beneficial if you are shooting on a black or darker background and you have a darker subject as well. There's definitely times when you have like you have a darker background and then they're wearing like, say like they're wearing a business suit or something, or they're wearing a black shirt. You can totally lose them into the background if you don't have this kicker there. And so especially when you're working with really dark colors, you want to have this kicker so that you can actually see the subject and they're not blending into the background. On this kicker, we have what are called barn doors, and we also have a little Fresnel. So I'll show you. This is just a magnet Fresnel, and what this does is it just focuses the light a little bit more narrow, so it's not bouncing. You want your kicker to be very focused. Very focused and narrow. So this just narrows the beam. And then we also have the barn doors on the back so that we can shape the light with the barn doors as well. Because we don't want this to be scattering everywhere. We want it to be a very narrow beam.
And the barn doors can also be kind of handy when just protecting the lens on your main camera from lens flare and things like that.
Okay.
I'll stand here.
And I will shape it.
You're shorter than me.
You can kind of see it even on when I'm placing it. I can see that it's on your cheek, right? Mm-hmm. That should be a light. Okay. These lights are BiColor, so they can be shot tungsten or daylight. You can change them. It's on a tungsten right now, and turning it, and it's on daylight. So depending on what you want to do, you can either match the light source so that it looks all daylight. In this one, you can do an accent with a different color if you wanted to put it on a tungsten, and then it feels a little bit more like a lamp or something coming into the room.
So at this point, we are going to turn off the ambient light in this room. We had that on because at the beginning of this video, if you recall, there was no other lights and you wouldn't have been able to see us at all. So we're going to turn those off so that we have a very controlled lighting environment and we can actually see what we're getting with our lighting setup. Destriking. Destriking.
Okay, so now you can see what we're actually working with once we have turned off our ambient light and we're actually working with a more controlled situation. So again, we have our key light now. Only light that's lighting me is the key light here, and then we have the kicker here. So now what we want to do for the third light is we just want to put a light on the background. This is again just going to help to pop me out a little bit more so it doesn't just feel, it gives more depth and dimension into your image. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to boost it enough that you can see the background, but you're not going to want to boost it so much that it's brighter than your subject. You really want the eye to be drawn to your subject as your eye is drawn to the brightest part of the image. We want to keep this feeling brighter, and the background is just to give a little bit of depth to it. We're going to light this one with a daylight. We're going to want to keep it in line with our key light as well. So we have our key, the light that brings the focus to my face. We have our kicker back here, which is just an accent light, and just to keep me from blending into the background, helps to just pop me out so that I'm not blending in. And then we have our background light, which is again going to help it so I'm not blending into the background, but it's also just going to give a little bit more dimension and depth. So this is our 3-point lighting setup. Often you'll see 3-point lighting is between the key, a fill, and then a kicker or a hair light. In this case, we kind of combined our key and our fill into one, and then we added a background light in as well. So you often want to think almost more so of like 4 lights when you're thinking of your lighting. Your key, your fill, your kicker or hair light, and then your background light.
All right, so that's it. If you have any questions about lighting, you can ask them in the comments below, and we'd love to get back to you on that.
We have more videos on lighting, so if you'd like to check those out, you can go check that out over here.
All right, see you in the next video, guys.